Welcome to Pod Places. We are back filling your brain with the most brilliance, the most interesting things. Why is that funny?
Set the bar high straight out of the gate.
Yeah.
All right. We should recalibrate. Welcome to Pod Places. This will likely be the very average thing that your ears consume this week. C plus.
Yeah, if not, money back guaranteed. So
Yeah, good story. We will find a DeLorean and deliver you an hour that you spent on this if we can figure that out. I'm Jeff Siegler with Revitalizer Die, typically in Pittsburgh, but visiting some family in Ohio this week. There are a lot of dogs here, so there will probably be lots of barking. Like about the time the fourth one stops barking, the first one starts again. So it's this cycle of barking that is not like, it sounds fun, I know, but it's not as great as you might think. It's
You're the guy that makes every Zoom call really awkward.
exactly, but it's nice. We're on a lake here. They've got a house on the lake, and God, the weather has been absolutely perfect. It's been 50-degree nights and 70-degree days, and it is beautiful. And we took a boat to get donuts this morning. Like, how ridiculous is that? You know?
jeez.
Living in water world.
Yep, exactly. Kevin Costner was on the ship with us. It was amazing.
Wow.
So, all right, Ryan, what's up with you?
Yeah, Ryan Short, Civic brand. I'm here in Dallas, Texas, so it's not nice and cool. It's 100 million degrees. But yeah, just got the kids started on virtual school this week, so they're in the conference room and podcast room over here to my right. So they might peek out at any minute, but so yeah, dealing with that.
I can't wait to see a quick backhand fly out.
Right.
And I'm Phil Lake of Full Steam Social Media here in Bay City, Michigan. Just another busy week of doing work stuff. It's not going to be 1,000,000 degrees here in Bay City, but I hear it's going to be hot. So I'll think about you when I'm sweating and swearing and thinking about how terrible the environment is today and tomorrow and Sunday when it gets 90 degrees, 95 degrees or something like that. So
I'll
considerably
send
less than
me.
1,000,000,000.
I'll send you selfies of me covered in White Claw, sleeping in the pond.
See, I used to be a hater. I used to look down upon those who drink the Claw. But I'm down with White Claw, man. Raspberry White Claw's my jam.
You know, same. It's actually something I've just recently come around to that I used to. I mean, it's somewhat emasculating, but I've decided in August to not have any carbs or sugar. Trying to trying a little something. Trying to. I've got surgery coming up, and I know that I'm going to be laid up a little bit. So I'm doing some things, and so I've had to come around to the seltzer. Like it's doable.
I mean, if it's 1,000 degrees and you're out on a boat, you're not gonna reach across the boat and grab your 18% Russian Imperial Stout and drink it with your friend. Like, no, you just want something fun and light and peppy. Raspberry White Claw, man. It's my jam.
I mean, I won't order one out because my ego can't handle that. But quietly,
you'll get there. You'll start becoming more comfortable with it, and then you'll wear your Claw pride, or you'll wave your Claw pride flag with pride.
Quick in Georgia, there's a company out of Philadelphia called Two Robbers, and they make one that actually come in like man-sized cans instead of the little skinny Virginia Slim cans, and so that makes me feel a bit better. And they're really good. They've got a lot of flavor, so I can pretend I'm still masculine when I have those.
Yeah, rough-hewn cans of wood.
Yeah, they're leather, wood leather. All right. Today we are going to chat first about Jaime's piece about the 10 stages of grief of being a small business owner and kind of the ins and outs of business ownership and maybe things that we've all learned and seen in our work, because I know all of us do a lot of work for small business. Then chatting about, there were some other topics I know that we will be chatting about. I'm really killing it. Not omelets. We did decide that. Ryan's piece in Forbes this week, civic engagement. And then finally, John Patchett with First and Main Films put out a, what did he call it? A film photograph, a video. There was a cool name. No, nobody.
I called it a portrait.
Maybe that's it. A film portrait. That was cool. About Tonino Washington and Tonino Wooden Bucks, which is pretty mind blowing actually. A pretty cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then on to recommendations. So, but Ryan, you want to jump in and talk a little bit about your Forbes piece and civic engagement and kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, for sure. So, the piece that we wrote is called Equity in Public Engagement. And, the reason we wrote it is, just with everything. And I actually did a Google Trends search, which is, I don't know if you've ever played with the Google Trends, where you can type in a word and you can see like how often it's searched. And we searched the phrase at the office one day, equity versus equality in Google Trends. And like shortly after like the George Floyd, protests and stuff were going off, there's like a massive spike in that term. And we had just noticed, just over the last couple of years, this is a great thing, a good thing. People are just talking about equity more, and cities are creating equity officers and divisions that focus on equity. And so we're saying the right things and we're doing the right things, we're saying the right things, but we're not doing the right things. Like we realized that a lot of more people were saying the term equity than we're actually like really doing anything that speaks about equity. And our take was that they're just using equity to mean like equality, and like we want to reach everybody, and we're going to kind of just invite everybody. And that's not really what equity is. Equity is you put in different effort to reach different groups of people based on what they need and where they're at. And there's a great little illustration that's kind of gone around social media of like 3 different height kids trying to look over a fence, and the tall kid can see, this medium kid and short kid can't. And so equality is they're all standing on a box that's the same size, and the small kid still can't see over. And the tall kid, he didn't need the box and to begin with, and that's equality. And equity is that tall kid doesn't need a box, shortest kid needs a bigger box, and medium kid needs a medium box. And, when we do public engagement, we're using all these different tools and digital engagement tools and social media and all these different things. But we still see so many communities just take a blanket approach to engagement. It's just all just a public meeting, or it's all digital, and it's not thinking about what's the right tool for the right person at the right time, and how do we really reach them, and are we reaching individual groups? And so that was kind of why we wrote the post, because we really try to take a truly equitable approach to engagement.
I love that it started off with being people centric, because so often we just talk about it like public engagement from the other side is like, we have a bunch of stuff to say and we're going to say it. And and then you parrot it back to us, or you ask us questions. And that's the concept of public engagement. But your concept of public engagement is you have to know your people. You have to go into the community and look at the different groups and look at, well, how do they interact with information? How do they receive information? What are the things that they struggle with? Which is different from this group over here and different from that group over there. You get to know them, and now you can figure out, okay, how do we reach those people, whether it's Facebook or public meetings or whatever. Who are the people within the group that we have to reach first so that they can help us reach the rest of the group? So this concept of influencers and people within different social groups and things like that. And it's just such a beautiful way to frame it, because how can you really engage and have a great conversation with people that you don't know? And the idea that you're reaching different people with different platforms, it's like, well, if our public engagement is one meeting on a Friday night at 7:30 p.m. and nobody comes, it's easy for the government side to say, well, nobody cares. Like, everybody's so apathetic. Well, it was just a really bad time for everybody. It wasn't that they don't care about their city. It's just you picked Friday night at 7:30 when everybody's doing everything else. And it was your bad. It wasn't their bad. It was you didn't think about what the people needed.
Right. Yeah. And some communities have, they've tried to address that, but they go too far the other way, and that's just as bad. And that was a point we wanted to make too of, if you cancel the public meeting and go, all right, everything's on Facebook now. Well, what you just then alienate a different audience that's not on Facebook. Like, you really do have to do the work, and it's hard, and you got to do, and the comment you made about finding the influencers and champions, that is so key, especially when you're reaching different cultural groups and things like that. There's, a lot of groups, there's just a distrust or disconnect with, city government and things like that. And, you have a white consultant roll into a group that's not going to be as well received as if you can connect with somebody within, their cultural group, that you can bring them on board, and then they can bring everybody along and disseminate their message within that group. I think that's really powerful to build those champions along the way.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, we all know how critical engagement is to a healthy community, but it's also one of those things that's just so wildly different from what it used to be. Like, our connection, I think about it as a relationship. If you've in a relationship, it's a back and forth, and you have to do your part, and you give a lot and you get something out of it. And we don't have most people don't have a relationship to their community anymore. It is not something that you think about. You pull out of your garage, you drive somewhere to work, to Aldi or whatever, and then you pull back in your garage and you don't deal with it. And I think that that's something that 100 years ago, that it was so obvious that you were intrinsically involved in your community, because you had to walk through it. You worked in it. You shopped with people that owned things. Like, it was just that relationship was readily apparent. And you kind of understood that back and forth, and now we're so far removed from it that you do have to take that extra effort. You do kind of have to point out. It's sort of like the branding cliche, like, whether you know it or not, you have a brand. Like, whether you know it or not, everybody in your community has a relationship to your community, but they're all probably not aware of it, or they're, and not being aware of it is a huge problem, which is to say, if you know about this thing, if you're a part of it, if you take action to improve it or get involved, it's going to be so much more. It's going to make your life so much better. You can create this thing and foster this thing that actually has tremendous meaning. That's going to give you more opportunity, more satisfaction, more happiness, more friends, all of those. But it takes a sort of concerted effort to point that out.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to our built environment of how we've structured things, because it's like exercise. Like, people didn't used to have to exercise because they naturally would just walk. They'd walk to the market, they'd walk here, and so now we have to like go out of our way to stay fit because of how our built environment is. We've got to go running and go to the gym, whereas people just kind of worked in the field in their yard and walked, and they were just kind of naturally fit. Engagement's the same way, because like you were saying, yeah, we just naturally were so ingrained in the community that we didn't even feel like we were doing engagement. We were just engaged. Now we have to go out of our way because, like you said, with the driving from your work to your garage, like, you don't ever really engage with the community or people. You just kind of do your work in your home, and that's it. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
You mentioned in your piece digital tools that you guys use for public engagement. Can you maybe talk briefly about those, just because there might be some people listening that
Sure.
concept of having digital tools for public engagement is a new one.
Yeah, so we've been using digital tools for a while, whereas a lot of firms are just, given COVID, are just now trying to kind of be like, all right, we can't have a public meeting. How do we do this? And so they're kind of looking at these tools, and we really caution against that, just because the last thing you want to do is be playing IT guy to 150 residents that are trying to do something, and they're all frustrated and it's not working. But just some examples. I mean, we basically try to, if we're going to do a workshop that's going to have an in-person workshop where there's going to be all these different stations, and a resident can come in and they can look at maps and drawings and renderings and, put sticky dots on things and roll their sleeves and get real involved. Well, that's great for the people that can come, but what about the people that can't? And so we've created these virtual engagement rooms that are, the idea is that it mimics that workshop, that in-person workshop, but online. And so people can go there and just like you walk into a room, you see these different stations, and we design it to look like an actual room with like easels and maps. And, we'll ask people mapping questions like, where do you want to, where do you feel like it would be greater to have a safer crossing? And people can drag a little pin on there and, leave a comment. And so there's interactive tools like that. One of my favorite ones is we built this like interactive budgeting question where it's, you have $15 to spend. How do you spend it? And there's like 3 $5 things, 3 $4 things, but they're obviously the numbers are made up, but it's like, do we want to give $5 to Amazon? Do we want to spend $4 on a new park? And so what that forces people to do is think through prioritization. Like we can't just check everything because that's over $15, and things have trade-offs and cost. And so, you made a comment earlier that public engagement, it's not one way. Like we're wanting to listen, but we're also wanting like the public to be more informed, educated. So it's this two-way. We need to hear what they want, but they also need to learn about the trade-offs and stuff. So yeah, budget questions, mapping questions. We've got all these different question types.
That educational component is such an important one because with my work on government, social media, a comment I see a lot when it comes to money is, let's say there's some kind of public art initiative going on in the city that comes from a grant, and people lose their brains. Like, why would we spend $100,000 on this art when we have to fix our roads? And they don't understand that a grant is different from the city budget, and the city budget isn't just this pool of money that everybody can go and grab some cash out and throw at whatever project comes up or priority comes up. Like there's a really strict flow of money, and that means that a lot of times you have a $17 million budget, but there's no money that can just go to these random projects, and people don't understand the differences and the ins and outs and the intricacies, and so they're understandably frustrated because they see a big number going to art that is getting painted on asphalt, and they go, well, like, why would we ever do that? There's more important things. And they don't get, well, that grant came from Bloomberg and they've got $1 billion that they're just handing out to cities, so that didn't cost us anything.
Right.
So yeah, education is huge.
Ryan,
and that's why we like to use
I think there are a lot of planning firms out there that kind of do the check the box type of engagement. Hey, we to do this, to get this grant, to disperse these funds, to go through this process, we have to say we engage the community. And I think a lot of cities also kind of feel that way, and it does feel like a checked box. Where do you see the difference being? Like, what's the difference between kind of the typical check the box approach and what you're trying to do? And part two, how does what's an engaged community behave like? What's the difference between a community or a citizen that's engaged versus a typical non-engaged human?
Yeah. I mean, on that first question, I think the good news for us, at least, is we typically get hired by the cities and communities that are really wanting to do meaningful engagement. They're not wanting to check the box, because most of them are wanting to check the box. They're required to do some kind of engagement. And I get it. Like, city staff, they get beaten down all the time. Like, you could have the best intentions, but if you've done that for a long time, you get beaten down. And so you look for the path of least resistance, and public engagement is not easy. It is not the path of least resistance. And so, if they want to just move forward with the plan and, okay, let's just do the meeting, it's actually great if no one shows up, because then no one's going to complain and yell at me for 30 minutes. And so most communities are looking for that. They just want to check the box. The ones we get hired by, though, they're typically looking for something different. They've got city leadership that realizes, hey, we're doing this the wrong way. We want to invest in this. And we still see, when we go into these big planning projects, we're often part of a larger team. And there's a lot of communities that say the right things, but then when it comes down to spending money on engagement, that's the first thing they cut. It all sounds great. We love it. Oh, it costs money. Let's just do the public meeting. And so, but I do think it's a growing thing. There's definitely kind of this changing of the guard, I felt like, with city leadership. where there's people that get the role of meaningful public engagement, and it's not that tokenism approach to engagement. It's not just checking a box. So yeah, and then your second question of, I guess, what was it? What does the difference look like?
How's it, if you have an engaged citizen versus a non-engaged citizen, like why would a city do that? What are the benefits to a municipality for pursuing such
I think the biggest thing that comes out of it is empathy amongst residents, for people that are their fellow residents that have different opinions, because when we do engagement, we also try to bring a lot of those diverse groups together. And so you have people that want density, those that don't want density. And if you can get them at the table together and not talk about density, but talk about other things, they'll start to see where they do have shared values. Because if you all live in a community together, there's some shared value that's bringing you there, that's keeping you there. And I think that's the biggest difference. When you have a community that's 1,000% siloed, and you have we want density, we want things to be how they used to be, we want things to change, and those people don't ever engage with each other, it's just that echo chamber, and they go deeper, they go more into their corners. And so a really well engaged community, people aren't as in their corners as more. They're like, well, I want it this way, but I see why young families want these amenities. And while that doesn't apply to me, I get that that's important, and they're important to our community. So I'm going to be okay with that project. And so if you do it right, it actually makes moving things forward and initiatives easier, because we've seen so many communities that are like, we don't want to do engagement because we're just going to bring out and highlight our differences, and we're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, not a good excuse.
Right.
That fits into this idea that implementation is so important, because yes, okay, equity is important. Yes, that's something we can all agree on. But where the rubber hits the road is, are you actually doing what is necessary to achieve that? And that's a conversation that a lot of people want to avoid, because that means that you actually have to do something. So I can get on Facebook and I can get on Instagram and say, like, we need a more equitable community. And the government comes on and says, yeah, we should. But if nobody's willing to say, okay, so how do we actually do that? And then be willing to spend the money or sit down and have the tough conversations, like, that's never going to happen. And then we wake up after 5 years and we wonder why it didn't happen. As well, we didn't actually connect the thought to the actions that had to happen in order to create that. And so, like, having somebody like you come in and say, like, this is how this is going to go, these are digital tools, this is the process, I mean, that gives people a plan. If I'm elected mayor and now I'm in charge of creating a more equitable community, but I ran a grocery store for 35 years and that's my wheelhouse, like, I'm not qualified to create a more equitable community. That might be something that I want, but I don't know how to do that. I don't have the tools in my toolbox, and so it's not going to happen if it's up to me. And that's the beautiful part of reaching out to people who have a lot of experience and they know it. They can come in, all I have to do is slide some money across the table and say, help me. And then you can come in and say, this is what's worked in 10, 20, 50 different communities across the nation. We're experts in this, and we're here to help you.
I think it comes back to this idea that we land on a lot, is that, as a council person and the city leader, head of an organization, that if you sort of push back against the idea, like, well, if we ask people what we want, they're going to tell us, or, if people show up, it's going to be a pain. Like, yeah, that's just the job. And honestly, right, like, if you had 50% of your citizens or 20% that cared enough to show up, to speak up, like, you're winning. You can sit back and relax and know that your community is going to improve drastically, because people then realize, like, oh, here's this relationship I'm in, and now I need to care about it enough to make it healthy. And so you desperately need that.
Yeah, I think the biggest myth, honestly, that people, or the lie that they tell to themselves or whatever, is that they really think that their community is different. Like, they think there's some challenge or problem in their community. And, as a consultant that works with cities, like, we're like, trust me, this is, they're like, well, our community is pretty different. We've got this group of of residents that they kind of want things to be the way they are, and we've got this group that wants things to change. And it's like, that's every city. That is not unique to you. And I think that keeps them from even trying, because they think there's some weird, unique thing. And it's just like, I can't lose weight because I've got this weird thing.
Oh
And
my
it's like, it's the same thing.
This is so true. Like, you've just said the most true thing that has ever been mentioned on Pod Places. I mean, that's absolutely the truth. Like, every city says, well, my downtown's struggling because Bay City sucks. It's like, well, no, downtowns are struggling across the world. Like, that's not a Bay City thing. That's not a Saginaw thing. It's not a Dallas thing. It's like an everywhere thing. And so there's commonalities between how to solve those issues then, because other people have addressed these issues elsewhere. You can't say like, well, this is just a Bay City thing. No, it's an everywhere thing. So talk to the experts who have fixed it.
Yeah, I want to hit the 100% button 1,000
Yeah.
times, because yes, like that is always what you run into. It's like, well, we can't hear it because we don't have a college, or because we do have a college, or because we're too big, or because we're too small, or because of this thing, or because of that thing. Like, oh my God,
We tried that once.
right. Like, all you're doing is making excuses for why you can't be successful. Like, stop it. These are just a litany of reasons why you're not going to try, and they're all bullshit. Like, every community can be successful. I always think back that, okay, so in the 1860s, a group of people grabbed some sticks and some stones and some mud, and they built a city. You're going to tell me that it just can't be, you can't fix up a few things? You can't in 2020? You don't think it's physically possible, or you don't think there's the technology to, renovate a building or open a new business? Like, you are not a unique and special snowflake. You are busted, dysfunctional, and messed up, just like 1,000 other communities. So stop sort of, I'm sorry to rant, but like, that's a symptom of dysfunction. Like, we highly functional people or cities know that, hey, I can get answers from somewhere else. I know that so-and-so did this thing and I can learn from them, or I'm going to go take a class and get better. And dysfunction always manifests itself as like, I've got nothing to learn. There's nothing, we're special and nothing applies to me. And it's such a trap.
We do it with every issue. I mean, like, we do it not just place-based issues. I mean, healthcare, gun control, like every issue that's an issue, it's like, well, that doesn't work here. And it's like,
Right.
These other countries are doing things like, and we can look at them. And I think the other thing is be open to looking at things from other places. We were in an interview for a project, and they were like, well, here's our challenge. How have you solved this in other communities? And we're like, oh, we've got 5 examples. Let me tell you. And then they immediately shut it down. It was the other consultant on our team. And they were like, no, we want Texas examples. And it's like, well, we solved your exact problem in 5 different places in different regions, but you're discounting because they're not also Texas cities. And it's like, you're missing the point. The challenge was your exact problem, and this is how we solved it. And I do think we just think like, well, there are regional differences. There are different things that you have to learn, and there are unique things about communities and individuals, but the problem in the process are typically not. Those are the same. The problems in the process the outcome is different for your community. The way you get there is different, but yeah, so that just drives me crazy when people are like, I need only Texas examples. And,
Right. Can you find me an example of a community in Texas with 23,000 people that was built in 1882?
Right.
And then we'll know. I always come back to the idea that like, we've solved all the issues. We know the answers to every one of these problems. It's just getting a community to actually go through the process. So this kind of, and thinking of transitioning to Jaime's piece on sort of the steps to the lessons of small business. I often think of that in a similar fashion, like that as a Main Street manager years ago, I recall a lot of business owners that were very unserious. And this is not a good reflection of what Jaime had to write. He was doing something else completely, but it just jogged my memory of dealing with a lot of people that were very unserious about running a business, that sought out low rent, that sought out, that don't have a marketing budget, that don't think about aesthetics, that basically were like, hey, owning a business seems cool. I don't, I'd like to work less than my regular job, so I'm going to start a small business, which is a funny approach. And then they would get furious at everybody else when their business wasn't successful, like mad at me, mad at the mayor, mad at like you're parking in front of your store and then you're complaining about a lack of parking. Like, so there are some sort of interesting overlap between this idea of, I'm unique and I'm special, and like good business owners and bad business owners, that Jaime's piece really made me consider.
His piece also really highlighted the fact that when people think about small businesses, or when you're thinking about starting a small business, what you're drawn to is the excitement of it and the passion of it, and the kind of the mental exercise of what it could become, and the potential, and all of these things, what you want. This is my opportunity to design my life. But what people don't talk about enough, especially now in today's culture where it's cool to be an entrepreneur, and everybody's starting a side hustle, and you've got 7 side hustles, and all this other stuff. What people don't talk about enough are things like despair. Like, you do feel despair running a small business. You do feel like you want to give up, and not in like an Instagram meme kind of like, when the going gets tough, like it's not that like gross kind of superficial fluffy despair and sadness. Like, it's a real innate internal, like, I'm done, like I'm just done. But you have to fight through those real emotions. And I think entrepreneurs and potential small business owners would be so much better prepared if they just sat down with somebody who has been running a small business for a year or 3 years or 5 years, and just said, tell me what it's like, beyond the first, like the buzz and the excitement of starting your business, and like, I'm an LLC now, and I designing my website, and the logo and all that stuff's fun. Just like, tell me what it's like. And then you can tell them, like, it's really, really awesome, and then it's really, really terrible, and you're tired, and you're stressed, and you're responsible for everything, and you love it one day and you hate it the next day, and it's this constant like conflict and battle and all these things. And then after that conversation, ask them, do you still want to run a small business? And if their answer is hell yeah, like, well, now you've got the right attitude, because you've been warned ahead of time that these are the emotions and situations you're going to face. But I think there's got to be some kind of initial culling of small, because like in my field, like, everybody wants to be a photographer and take pictures for a living. It's like, well, I love photography, and I want to take pictures for a living. And so they start their own photography business, and then they forget that it's a business.
Yeah.
It's not just photography. And so you have all of these really struggling photographers out there that aren't making any money because they don't do any marketing. They're constantly just asking their friends and family on Facebook, hey, I have some sessions open on Friday if anybody's game. And then they're really stressed out because they're not being successful, because they don't get, like, well, business means something completely different than the skill or the profession or the career that I've chosen.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is that we put too much pressure on our jobs to make us happy. And there's so much out there about, like, do what you love, follow your dreams. And, when kids are in school and they're taking classes, they're like, take classes about things that you're interested in, in major in something that you're going to be, you love. And, I'm fortunate. I'm very passionate about it, and I love what I do. But I think that puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people to feel like, because maybe you love photography, but maybe you don't need to be a photographer. Maybe you should just take pictures on the weekend, right, and like and just love that. That doesn't mean you should have a photography business. And so it's great if you can do that, but there's also nothing wrong with having a sales job at a company that affords you to go do the things that you love on the weekends and at night and with your family. Like, that's also just as good. And I think a lot of people, they feel like they've got to get out of that, and they've got to, it's like a really old book, but it's like the classic small business is the E-Myth. Every business owner, entrepreneur should read that, because it gets into, I can't remember the different terms, but that they call people, but there's like the technician, I think is what they call it. That, you know, like maybe you opened a pizza shop because you're really good at making pizzas, but making pizzas has nothing to do with running a business and managing payroll and marketing and all of those things. You're just good at making pizzas. And so you need to recognize, like, am I that type of person that I run a pizza shop because I'm good at making pizzas, and therefore I need to fill in these other gaps and do these other things to make it successful. Whereas I could run a pizza shop knowing nothing about pizza. I hire that guy and I do the other things. And so it's a really important book, because you can't just be like, well, I like pizza, I like photography, so I'm going to do that, and ignore the business side of it.
I remember an episode of Dirty Jobs. I remember watching it in high school, and Mike Rowe was interviewing, I think, a woman who was like sorting fish into different bins, like different size fish into bins. And he said something to her, just kind of joking, like, are you following your passion? and she just looked at him kind of stunned, like, no, this is my job. Like, my passion is outside of my job. And it blew my mind. Like, I remember sitting there going, holy shit. Like, it just flipped my world upside down, because I had been told so many times up to that point, like, well, you know, what do you like? What is your passion? What can you see yourself doing for the next 50 years for free? And like, do that. Like, that's what your job should be. And here's this woman sorting fish going, no, this isn't my passion. Like, I'm working here so that I can hang out with my family on the weekend. And it was just a completely different concept.
Although it would have been cool if she's like, fuck yeah, like I grew up dreaming of fish sorting, and big ones, tall ones, like I love this shit. Fish sorting is my jam. Yeah, I loved Jaime's piece, because it really was an insight into the ups and downs of like running a small business and being a small business owner. And like, that's not something that is discussed enough. And he put a really personal face on it, and I appreciated it so much. And I guess the way, you know, I've come to understand running business, like it's like having another child, that it is sometimes rewarding, sometimes disappointing. It's scary. You can get worried a lot. You definitely get excited, but it also never goes away. Like, you have to care for this thing every single day. And if you have a business, and that's where kind of the separation comes, that you guys getting to this point of, you know, was it a job or is it your passion? Like, I think when it comes to running a small business, it better be your passion. Like, you know, Amber, my wife and I were having to talk about this. She was interested in, you know, there's a building in town she wants to renovate, and like, until that building becomes your driving obsession, stop. Like, you know, wait until you hit to the point where it's like, I can't do anything else or renovate this building or something like that. Like, that's when you know. And I think small business, if you're going to get into being an entrepreneur, it should probably be something that's like, I can't do anything else. This is something I have to do. It's an obsession. Because otherwise, yeah, there's gonna be times like, I'm tired of this. I don't want to tend to this thing this week. I want to just get away from it. And that's not how these things work. They require constant maintenance. And
what you said about her and her thinking about the building and it becoming an obsession, it reminded me of this poem by Charles Bukowski that's called So You Want to Be a Writer. And basically, like, his point is, like, if the words aren't bursting out of you and exploding onto the page every single day, like, don't do it. If you're doing it for money, don't do it. If you're doing it for fame, don't do it. If you have to sit there and like rewrite and you're angry and you're bored, like, don't do it. Like, if you're doing it for all of these other reasons other than just the writing, like, you're fucked. Like, you should just stop, because there's like, you have to be so consumed with the art and the act of writing to survive all of the crap that you're going to go through during your life as a writer. And like, that's the thing that's going to pull you through, is that commitment and that dedication to the concept or to the craft or to the purpose or to the mission. And so if you're obsessed with like the coolness of renovating a building, you're not actually obsessed with renovating a building. You're obsessed with everything that comes after that.
Right.
And that's not a good reason to do anything.
Yeah, that it almost has to be a necessity. It's like I can't, either I have no other choices, and so I have to make this work, or I can't stop thinking about it. But to your point, Ryan, it's like, yeah, there's maybe you are very good at being a doctor. It doesn't mean you should run a practice. Maybe you love making pizzas or whatever, but the part that you enjoy is 50% of it at most. The other part is where you have to spend all your time. And if you're in it because you're a hobbyist and you like this part of it, and you're not going to if you're not going to do the hard work, like get out of your shop, walk around, go to meetings, like you have to be involved in the community. You have to do a ton of stuff that isn't making the actual pizza so anybody will buy your pizza. And if you're not in for that, you might need to rethink it.
Yeah, it's a weird balance, because you're right that you do have to be passionate about it and love it and think about it. And when I'm in the shower, when I'm driving, when I'm flying, I'm thinking I'm constantly thinking about place and design and how's that, I'm just I can't not think about it. That said, do I do that for my job every day? No, I'm not passionate about talking to our property manager about our lease and dealing with taxes and dealing with an employee issue or a client issue. I'm not passionate about those things at all, but I have to do those things. And I think that's the problem is, people, they want to be passionate about 100% of what they do. And you can be passionate about it and just understand that other things come with it. Because if I was going to be 100% passionate about it, I'd have to do something that I frankly couldn't make money doing, and so it's definitely a trade-off of I'm passionate about this and therefore I'm willing to put in the work doing the parts that I'm not passionate about.
My kids are passionate about TikToking, but I'm not sure if they can go pro in TikTok yet.
Well, we do such a disservice to kids, like in this sphere, because we tell them you can be whatever you want to be when you grow up, and they're like, hell yeah, I spend 4 hours a day on TikTok. I'm going to do that. Like when I was teaching kids to wanted to be YouTube stars, it's like, well, we're telling them that's they can be successful doing those things, because we want to tell them these really nice placations of you can as long as you follow your passion, you can make it work. It's like, well,
yeah, we're pretty blunt about that. Like the kids, any one of them oh, I love sports. I got bad news for you. You're not going pro in sports. You'll go pro in something else. You might go pro in banking. You might go pro in.
When I was a kid, my mom would say to me, and it's such a vivid memory. She'd be like, "There's always going to be someone better than you," And it's such a but it if I think I've got to be the best at this or I can't do it, because you'll never start things, you'll never do things, and you'll always quit. But if you're well, yeah, there's always gonna be people that are better than me, smarter than me, more talented, whatever. But that doesn't mean I can't also do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very cool piece, and it was just nice to kind of get an insight into their experience starting a bookstore and the ups and downs and the pains of it. That was just it was at times hard to read in a way that ouch, I can feel how tough that must be, because it does, Phil, you and I had to talk like this. It was, when even in transitioning in business, there's iterations and they grow and they change. But, when you sort of lay one to rest to grow into another, it's a little bit of pain. You're like, oh my God, I put so much time and love and energy into that. And now I have to sort of say, you get wrapped up emotionally. And that's not good.
It's that loss aversion that keeps us from moving forward, because loss aversion says, well, I've already invested so much of my time and my money and my effort into this thing. If I get rid of it, now I've lost something. And so I have to try to avert that loss, because I don't want to feel that kind of sadness and despair that comes with setting my former business on a ship and burning it at sea. I don't want to deal with that. And so I'm just going to keep hanging on and hanging on and hanging on. And I mean, that's not growth. It does take a lot of experience and knowledge to know when to do that. But yeah, sometimes you just got to burn the ship.
Burn the ship. finally, John Paget this week with Place in Main Films had put out a little video. He made not a little video, a regular size video. Sorry, an awesome video. Very, very cool piece. He went out to Tonino, Washington, to capture what they're doing with this idea of Tonino bucks, and it is so interesting and cool and fascinating and like simultaneously mind blowing. So when COVID hit, Tonino kind of reached back into their history vault and pulled up this concept that they used to use, which was local dollars, wooden Tonino bucks as a currency. And I don't know if it was, during the Great Depression, I can't recall when they used to use those, but they had a purpose. So the city set aside $10,000 as a way to back that. Like this $10,000 represents these 10,000 that we're going to print in Tonino bucks, and we are going and base it on need. So people come to the city and say, hey, like, yeah, COVID's busted up my work. I got none jobs. I could use some Tonino bucks. And so they gave out all 10,000 in Tonino bucks that could only be used in local businesses. And so, yeah, Amazon is not getting any Tonino bucks. Walmart is not getting any Tonino bucks, but the local coffee shop, the local grocery. It was such a cool approach to this and such a different way of thinking of coming back to that idea that we talk about a lot. It's like, it's creating local wealth, and this is doing just that. I've loved it.
One of the most impressive parts to me was that Tonino is a city of less than 2,000 people. So this isn't a huge city with a giant team of people and $100 million to back this project. Like it's literally like one of the smallest cities in America saying, hey, let's take $10,000, let's make our own currency, let's do this. And I hope that it really inspires other cities to go, well, we've got 50,000 people and we could afford to give $50,000 to our community. Like, why are we not doing that if this city is doing it? And like, that was one of the most impressive things to me when I saw that it was less than 2,000 people. I was like, holy crap, this is such an immense amount of creativity and effort and saying like, how can we help the people in our community that need it the most right now?
Yeah. And what's cool about it is, like you said, Amazon doesn't take these, right? And so when an economy can truly be local, it's not an expense. Like it's an investment. That money stays in the community and just cycles through and moves around. And so it never leaves. Only when it leaves is it a loss. Mm-hmm. And so, when our government and, we do these like incentives, where it's all right, everybody's going to get a check for $1,200. Like if we just take that money and just give it to Walmart or just stick it in our bank and don't use it, it doesn't do any good. But those stimulus type things, they really don't cost money. They make money and they're very beneficial if it's local and it's moving around in the economy. That's how an economy works. But when you've got a leak and it just goes out through Walmart and these things, or it doesn't move at all,
right,
it doesn't help.
Right. They leave your town and go into additional boats and additional vacation houses, and that doesn't help. I always think about, a truly sustainable economy and self-reliant. Like all the goods and services made here are produced here, and that is perfect. It's sort of this perfect circle of, hey, I make enough of the things that you want, you make enough of the things that I want, we all want, and we all have enough. And there's such a leak due to, the Amazons and the Walmarts, so that, yeah, even if a city, went to 50% of this type of local type currency, you could see how huge the impact would be. It would just retain more. It would limit your options. I love that way of thinking about it, and how it's, okay, we can't force, we've tried to convince everybody that, hey, shop local, shop local. It's like, well, maybe there's a mechanism that we could nudge you along in the right way. I know I've got a couple $100,000 in Camel Cash that I'm waiting to, that's I've got that's harder to spend though. That's been a bit frustrating. Like the Amazon won't take that either.
Do you guys get into the cryptocurrency stuff and the?
No, my brother has made a little bit of an investment in it, but he did it more just for fun.
Yeah. I mean, currencies just in general, like I feel like I was I was an adult business owner before I really even wrapped my mind around like how it actually works, because it's such a weird thing. Like, like my wealth is really just a number on a computer at Chase Bank. They say I have this much, so that's what I have. And if they just changed to that number, I would be, it's just like a made up fake thing. And the fact
it's like we're all pretending.
Yeah. And then, so it's like, and the fact that like learning that like our country, like the Federal Reserve can just like print more money and create money. Like I never understood it. And I still really don't. And I don't really totally wrap my mind around the cryptocurrency. There's a lot of people that I've talked to that are super into it and they know a lot about it, but it's weird because it is this just, I don't know, like we think that like the US dollar is some magical thing that like is based on something. And it's like, we could trade anything. Like it's an economy could be anything. It's just, where's the trust,
Right. And I think we got away from the gold back or gold standard or whatever that, right. A dollar did equate to the Federal Reserve or, having that much gold somewhere under lock and key. And that is sort of what, that was that security. And yeah, I think we've gotten away from that. So it's like, well, what does it represent? Where is that now? Right. That we were, I don't know. It's all crazy, but that, the FDIC, you think It's a Wonderful Life. That's what happened before the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that, hey, I want my money out. I need it now because I'm worried that you won't have that money anymore. Right. So everybody made a run on banks and they're like, oh God,
they don't have it like if, they don't have all of our money sitting there. It's kind of a pyramid scheme. Like, they're holding on to my money and then loaning it to other people. And, so it is super weird. That's kind of why I've never really been into like day trading and stocks and like people get, because to me, it's so not tangible. It's like I could just wake up and they'd be like, you have nothing now. And I'd be like, oh, shoot.
Right. And there, yeah, it's a weird space too. Jon Stewart was on with Jim Cramer once and really kind of called him out. It's like, you guys it's like you're playing a little game with everybody's retirement. And it's like, oh, I won today. I made a gamble and won. It's like, it's really gross. And I don't care for this whole industry and how there's the focus on the market is just, it's too much. And it's for a small group of people. And it's not what a lot of people get by on or how they live their lives. And so thinking I can't remember who said it. It's like using the stock market as a means of demonstrating how well the economy is doing it's ridiculous. You're basically saying like, this is how well the 1% is doing or the top 5%. It has nothing to do with how the majority of people are doing.
Yeah. I went to this, I had the opportunity to go to this client meeting a few years ago. It was a really surreal experience. So I drove down to Austin and I met with this guy who is, I'm not going to say his name in the podcast, but I said it, people would know the name. And
is it Burt Reynolds?
It's not Burt Reynolds, but let's just go with Burt Reynolds. So me and Burt Reynolds, but no, we went to a restaurant that was on the top floor of this building in Austin. It's like, I forget what it's called now, but it's like this private club restaurant that all of the it's either millionaires or like state like senators and things like that in Austin. It's this like private club up at the top. And there's like this famous Marilyn Monroe painting in the bathroom that like has a story and it got stolen. And it's just, but the normal person can't go in there. Right. It's these people that are pulling strings and making the economy and the world work.
You're calling out me and Phil. Like you're saying Phil and I can't go there.
It's like us going to Arby's. Think of that. But I remember going in there and feeling so out of place. And because everybody in there is like either millionaires or senators and things like that. And we're on the top floor of this building. And I remember hearing this conversation and looking out the window and seeing all the normal people on the street, riding their bikes, going around town. And
poor people. Hello.
Yes. But immediately realizing there's two different worlds and there's even two different economies. Like we're down here thinking we're doing things like, oh, I'm getting jobs and I'm saving money. Up here, these are the people that are making all these decisions and doing economic trade. Like we're trading like one-off stocks. They're like bundling 50,000 mortgages and trading. Like that's it's like we're living in this fake economy and they're the ones controlling everything. And so that's why I love this wooden dollars thing, because it's like they're saying, forget that. We're going to do our own thing over here. And it's our local thing, because, I mean, it's not just the 1%. Like we're, we think we're doing stuff like even by voting and saving and like our little efforts, but the people that are making the big decisions, they're controlling all of that. And it was eye-opening and depressing and weird, but
it was just like, right though, that problem is so prevalent and persistent, and like, yeah, this Tonino bucks just it took care of all that. I mean, it is so, it can't leave. It can't leave. It is still money. You're injecting a ton of money into the economy that has no way to leave. So it does build wealth. Like it's simultaneously so simple and also like, oh my God, my brain is melting out of my head because you've sort of hacked all these problems all at once. And that was the, more of the 1920s economy than the 2020 economy, that we all just traded that money and wealth back and forth. We all were just hooking each other up all the time. And how nice, like, oh, I need something, I can enrich my friend or neighbor or, colleague that has those things. And we don't hardly have any of that anymore. And how there's a responsibility component to spending. And that's hard to do sometimes in some places, is support somebody in your town. So, but think how many more local business owners you would have with if you really leaned into that kind of the local dollar type economy, that local currency economy.
Yeah. Have you ever like been sitting in traffic and you just think like, if everybody just started driving at the same time, it would all go? Like that's how an economy is. Like when our economy slows down and we all stop working, there's still the same things that need to get. We all just slow down and like sit, like you do in your car in traffic. And it's like if we all just started moving and going, and I think the wooden bucks thing is like, I don't know, economies are just weird things. We just all kind of stop and then we all kind of start going, and it's all just based on confidence. Do I feel like it's safe to move? Do I feel like it's safe to spend and go?
Exactly. I love the wooden bucks too, because it ties in with this idea of implementation. Like the shop small day, small business day comes around once a year and everybody says, I'm going to shop local, and everybody hashtags everything. Like I'm shop local. And then we forget about it. And there's no like, yeah, I love local businesses, but I'm still gonna send all my money to Amazon because it gets there tomorrow. And so there isn't any sort of like concrete implementation coming out and trying to encourage people in a sustained and effective way to actually shop local over the long term. Like you're not going to make a difference in a small business owner's life by going and buying a sandwich on small business day. Like you're not like, they appreciate it, and yes, I will sell you my sandwich, but where are you the rest of the year? Like if you decide, okay, once a week I'm gonna buy that sandwich, okay, now we're talking. Now I as a business owner, now I've got a sustained source of income because I've got a person who's investing in my business. And so I love the construct of, hey, we're actually going to create this plan that is going to help our business owners as well as the people who are hurting the most during this time.
Yes, I hate how gimmicky that feels. Like, right, the small business gimmicky day. Like, no. It has to be an everyday thing, and that's partially. It kind of goes back to our other conversation and Joe Borgstrom's piece that, if you let a Walmart in, or a Home Depot or whatever, that's $7 million that's just leaving your community that could have sustained so many entrepreneurs and families. And so it's the onus. You need the individuals, but the onus really comes on local government. Like, how do you create a system? How do you create this sort of environment that is so easy, it's supportive and beneficial to small business owners? Because it's not, one or two isn't going to cut it. That's nice, but it's not the same as having 100 businesses all in a district that are thriving. And that's up to the municipality and government to figure out, and not, you'll get the individuals that come forth, but you kind of have to nail that structural piece first. All right, I believe we said all the words on that topic.
Poof.
Nailed it. Solved it.
Which makes me think, so we're gonna do a little something new here. I don't know if we're ripping this off. I'm sure it's probably done in other podcasts, but maybe we'll just do it better, or maybe we invented it. But we're wanted to be aware that there's a lot of people out here working in this space doing amazing things that we want to highlight, give a little love to. And one that was on mine this week was Small Town Hustle. And it's three guys out of Marietta, and I love what they're doing. It really gets back to a lot of the subjects we've just been talking about. But they're doing a series of podcasts, and it's basically like 101. Here's how your city functions. And I think that is so important, because I didn't realize, like, I spent 2 years, getting my master's in urban planning, and then I went and actually worked alongside the city and had no clue about anything. Like, the way a city functions is interesting, it's fascinating, and you realize once you jump into it, oh my God, nobody has a clue. People are online ranting about things that they truly just don't understand. City can't do all the things that you think that they can. And in understanding what role or responsibilities a city manager or mayor or council person has, and how a city functions, just was made a big difference. And so they're going through piece by piece and talking about, like, here's how this thing works, here's how zoning works, here's how parking works, or urban design. And that's
What's
really
the name of it again?
a Small Town Hustle. And it's just we all should know how a city functions. What are those moving parts? And they're breaking that down, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. The two that I mentioned is, and one probably some people know about, but the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and Stacy Mitchell, like, what they're doing over there, just I love them, because they just rail against Amazon on a daily basis. And but they're really powerful, and their research and their data, and they're just telling that story really, really well. And so I think residents, community, because we have to learn more about that and change that narrative. I think that's super cool and something to check out. And then just kind of a really also just cool but fun thing, in Klamath Falls, Oregon, there's this group, the Klamath Piano Project. Check them out on Instagram, Klamath Piano Project. But they like paint these pianos and just put them out in public spaces. And I don't know, it's just really cool. And it's just amazing. You paint an old piano and stick it in public, and someone sits down and starts playing, and it's just like changes the whole space and everybody's day and week. And it's really cool.
And I will point out that they're Proud Places super fans, because they tag us in all of their Instagram posts. I think we shared one on our Instagram feed, but yeah, they're crazy about us. So let's be crazy about them.
Yeah,
Crazy about them.
Yeah. Mine is a little bit different vein. I discovered a Facebook group for people who work in government social media. And I think it's just like Government Social Media is the name of the group. And it was such a breath of fresh air. Like, when I walked in, or I joined the group, it was like, I found my people. Like, here's this like really forgotten niche of people that are responding to everybody's comments and all the terrible comments. And it's a really active group. And so if you're a person that is running a government social media account, you have to go join it, because people are saying, hey, we need a new social media policy. And everybody goes, give me your email address, I'll send you ours. Or people taking screenshots and saying, how would you respond to this guy talking about legalities of things? Like, for instance, you can't delete comments on a government social media page because it goes against state regulations. And some people may not know that, and they're unwittingly doing illegal things. And so it's such a useful group for such an important thing, and such a space that we all have to do better. better at. Governments using social media to communicate with people. And so if you're a professional in that space, go join that group because it is super helpful.
Awesome. Excellent. Cool. All right, gentlemen, I think that about does it. I think we got all the words in and just the right ones. So that's good.
We got all the words.
Hey, you guys, any big weekend plans?
No, one news thing that I haven't been in school in 18 years probably, and I just signed up for an online college class, and so I'm pretty stoked about that. That's going to be starting up. But my grandfather and great grandfather went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and it was an engineering school. Now it's like one of the best design and architecture schools. And I've always wanted to go there, but I don't live in Brooklyn. And I just signed up for some courses. I'm doing a downtown revitalization and then a human-centered design course. And so partly for fun, partly just to say that I also went to Pratt, but I'll be starting that. So
I can't wait to see you in Pratt t-shirts every day.
I'm going to order one. I'll show up on the podcast with it.
What about you, Phil?
No big weekend plans for me. My daughter is having a sleepover with my mom and dad this weekend, so hopefully I'm just taking naps.
Nice.
Very cool. Yeah, we're gonna ride around on some boats some more.
Go get
and drink some claw.
Yep, get some claw. It is important that you follow us on the social medias, they say.
Yes, why it is so important. One of the most important things, because when you follow us on social media, you get immediately connected to all of the content that we produce every single week from 15 different contributors that are all experts in their field. We're sharing content from other organizations all over the place. We've got a killer Facebook group called Downtown Happy Hour where people working in place or people just invested in place or interested in place can go on and ask questions like, what is your city doing about vacant buildings? And everybody jumps on and says, this is what our city's doing, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't. So follow us on Facebook, join the Facebook group, Downtown Happy Hour, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, and then head over to our website, proudplaces.com, and sign up for our newsletter. Do all of those things. We want to hear from you, so leave your comments, share all our posts and all of that stuff. Because what we're really trying to do is build a community that talks about community and that takes a conversation and a two-way street. So follow us on social media and then visit proudplaces.com.
Rad. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Later.